So honestly, for these wheels, it should be a no-brainer to use TPU on this part, because you're gonna, on impact, you're gonna be putting a lot of force and bend on those. The wheels being solid, yes, but the problem with TPU is that if you over tighten stuff and you pinch it together, it's going to cause that wheel to catch on these and not spin freely. So it's really kind of tricky, and you can't really, other than like gluing some of the hardware that you don't want rotating into this print, you can't really prevent it. That's the only way that I've found that you can go with TPU on this base part and prevent that type of thing from happening, meaning you glue the nut in there and then you Loctite the screw that goes into that nut, and you make sure before you use them that that Loctite has held up. But I think that you might actually need stronger Loctite than just the blue Loctite, maybe even the red. But I've heard that the red is more permanent, much like super glue, and if it's too permanent, when you try to back it out, it's just going to, I mean, assuming if you have this nut super glued in there, it won't roll around in there, rotate around in there freely and strip that out. But that's also another issue that you have to deal with, because this cutout for the nut is a little large. Not really large enough to strip it out with minimal force, but a lot of force, yes, because TPU is rubberized, so it's not going to have a significant bite on anything that has enough force to force something out, right? So there's a lot of things that could be improved with these designs, which I have been working on and am working on currently, as well as probably changing the placement of these screw holes a little bit in certain directions, because I noticed that obviously you look at them in every axis, they're stretched out this way, which really they need to be stretched out they need to be all closed in the direction that they are, and they need to be stretched out that way instead of this way on these, and on these that way, because you need to be able to turn them a little bit to adjust to different frames. Because when you post these to whether it's these were designed for a specific frame, which I cannot find, but when you put them on a true X frame or a stretch X frame, they're bowed out a little bit. And on a true X frame, they're bowed out just minimally. But on a stretched X frame, they're bowed out even more. And it causes, when you send it rolling, just free rolling, like you take the drone and you just toss it on the ground and let it roll on itself, it causes it to do this kind of thing. And you'll notice that. So, and that's a huge problem and flaw. And I think that the reason why they made them like this is to give you a little bit of adjustment in certain directions. But you can't really, with these two axes being stretched out this way and these two being stretched out this way, you can't really move it front or back or side to side, because the way that those are cut out doesn't allow you to do that. So it's really pointless for them to make any of these wider or longer than they should be for the screw to go through, right? So my idea was to take each one of these, maybe make them a tiny bit tighter, but also make it like a cross. But you can't go too wide on a cross style, because then your screw heads will just rip through entirely. So it's tricky, but it's doable. And I really do like the simplicity of this design and the size, but I also think that the wheels could be smaller. And the wheels, on the inside of the wheels, if I grab a wheel real quick, hold on. On the inside of the wheel, not the actual diameter of where the bearings will go, but the inner part, that thin area, is very, very thin. Way too thin. And if you don't get it, like in this video, you can kind of see that a little bit. You really can't. It's so thin that this wheel could just like snap right out. So that inner part, the thickness of that inner part, I thickened it way thicker. I also thickened the wheel, and I think that thickening the wheel a little bit will, because it's quite loose in there, which creates that wobble a lot, unless you really bite down on it. But if you bite down on it, then the wheel doesn't spin freely, right? So what I have done is made the wheel thicker and made it to where there's less slack in there. It also, making that wheel thicker, or wider, sorry, also alleviates the longevity of the wheel, because the thinner a wheel, any wheel, since it gets a lot of use and probably is at some points going to be sliding or grinding or drifting across whatever surface it's rolling on, it's going to get ground down over time. So the bigger the surface area or the circumference of that thing that is doing that, the longer it can last. So there's two different reasons, really, two different main reasons why I decided to make that wheel wider for this design. And like I said, this base part, this base plate or part, whatever you want to call it, the holder, is also going to have quite a few modifications done to it, or is having quite a few modifications done to it, to make sure that we can make the most optimal, the most best innovated style or version of this whole wheel. And I will be releasing that whenever it's finished.